So hello everybody, this is Bhante Joe here, and I'm just here at Endagala in the forest near the monastery, and thought to record a 30-minute or so Dhamma talk and meditation for the Endagala mission in Toronto. So I thought that maybe could lean forward a little bit and arch the spine, and look about 3 feet in front, and close our eyes. And can spread thoughts of goodwill, spreading thoughts of goodwill to our right hand side, wishing may all beings to my right be happy and at ease. May they put in place the causes necessary to be happy and at ease. And we can make the mind infinite, can make it unbounded, all the way to the ends of the universe and beyond, in every dimension. May all beings to my right be happy and at ease. And we can spread thoughts of goodwill to our right hand side and our left hand side, wishing may all beings to my right and my left be happy and at ease. May they put in place the causes necessary to be happy and at ease. And we can make our minds infinite, can make them unbounded, all the way to the ends of the universe and beyond, in every direction, every dimension. May all beings to my right and my left be happy and at ease. And can spread thoughts of goodwill to our right hand side, to our left hand side, and in front. And can spread thoughts of goodwill to our right hand side, our left hand side, in front and behind. And can spread thoughts of goodwill to our right hand side, our left hand side, in front, behind, and above. And can spread thoughts of goodwill to our right hand side, our left hand side, in front, behind, above, below, all around in every direction, everywhere. May all beings all around in every direction, everywhere, be happy and at ease. May they put in place the causes necessary to be happy and at ease. And we can make the mind infinite, can make it unbounded, all the way to the ends of the universe and beyond, in every dimension. May all beings all around everywhere be happy and at ease. And can open our eyes and do a short half hour or so Dhamma talk. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhaṃ saranang gacchāmi, Dhammāṃ saranang gacchāmi, Sanghaṃ saranang gacchāmi. Dutiyampi Buddhaṃ saranang gacchāmi, Dutiyampi Dhammāṃ saranang gacchāmi, Dutiyampi Sanghaṃ saranang gacchāmi. Tatiyampi Buddhaṃ saranang gacchāmi, Tatiyampi Dhammāṃ saranang gacchāmi, Tatiyampi Sanghaṃ saranang gacchāmi. So I hope that everybody is having a great day in Toronto or wherever it might be. And so I came out here and have been out here many times, or I wouldn't say many, but now a fair number of times I've been out to this rock formation. Endagala was actually here maybe just 4 or 5 days ago, and I've been coming here very frequently. It's kind of it's in the middle of the forest. Well, maybe not the middle, but it's in the forest. In front is just beyond these kind of tree cover. There's actually a farmer's field, and beyond that is a kind of road that leads to the monastery. But it's a kind of very peaceful place. It has a kind of very quiet feel about it, and not many people come here. So it's a nice place to go to. And of course, being from Canada, I'm not too familiar with like ancient ruins, say, in the middle of the forest. And this is actually a large stone that was apparently at one time the palace, or not the palace, but the resting place of a king. So when a king used to come to this area, he would come to rest here, which is why they call it Endagala, which means bedrock. So it's kind of, you can't see it from that vantage point, but you can maybe see a little carving here. There's actually some post holes here, so they're probably pillars. And this might have been a little room, and there's another room over there. So there's not so much, I guess you'd say, large carved ruins like this in Canada. So for me to come here is still very interesting, very still seems pretty neat that this is here. And also, as mentioned, it's a kind of peaceful place. But as I was on my way here, coming here today, kind of noticed when I first came here, kind of very careful, or felt pretty. You call it like the word trepidatious, kind of being very careful, a little afraid, kind of coming through the forest. The forest here, you have to go through a little bit uncharted area, and kind of there's not really so much of a path. It's kind of there's a path that some people have walked on now, but we actually hacked one out of the woods. But there's not like a big, easily discernible path. And so when I first came here, I was kind of very careful, kind of stepping very carefully, and didn't want to run into any snakes, or potentially would bump into thorns. Potentially there's kind of these leeches that are here, and also wanted to be respectful in this kind of ancient place, kind of one of the big teachings in the Thai forest tradition, or that at least that I was kind of heard pretty strongly when I was staying with one teacher from the Thai forest tradition, which is that whenever you kind of go into the wilderness, you want to make sure that you're really respectful. And same thing with kind of coming to like an ancient place like this. One wants to make sure that one's behavior is really respectful. And the reason being is because in Buddhism and I think other religions too, there's kind of beings that aren't just human. There's also maybe some other beings living in this area. And especially around kind of very ancient places, especially in the wilderness, this is kind of their home, or potentially their home. So one wants to be very respectful, very kind of careful of one's behavior. But notice that coming up here, kind of this is maybe coming here so many different times, I was much less careful, kind of. There's one area where the grass is a little overgrown, so I thought, okay, here I'll be careful. But if you walk on the same road, many, many times, then eventually the kind of sense of heedfulness falls away. The sense of kind of carefulness falls away. And as I was coming here, I was kind of just, walking here, and then, wait a minute, I still have to maintain this kind of carefulness, this kind of heedfulness. This is one of the interesting things, is this quality, what the Buddha calls heedfulness, is basically this quality of being very kind of conscientious, very careful in what one does, to try to find the appropriate balance. As kind of almost with any qualities, there's always a point where a certain quality can go too far and can become something negative. And sometimes one needs to pull in qualities that are its opposite. So, for example, compassion. If somebody keeps cultivating compassion, there can be a point where it goes too far and kind of becomes too compassionate. One needs to pull in kind of discernment to balance it out. And so this quality of heedfulness is something that the Buddha always recommends in practice, in the practice of meditation. It's also this kind of interesting thing when people first come to meditation, when one first comes to Buddhism, usually one is very careful in the way that one watches one's breath. One is very kind of, tends to be much more aware, tends to be staying with the breath a lot longer, tends to be putting forth quite a lot of kind of effort to stay with the breath. And the terrain is new, kind of what one is doing is new, kind of meditation is something new, and the potential results that come from meditation are something new. So one tends to pay quite a lot of attention. But then over time, one gets used to sitting down and meditating and kind of going through the routines. And so over time, it's like walking on this same road all the time. And one kind of, becomes, say, like a little bit, not uncareful, but it's kind of very familiar territory. So one just goes along, and one might not pay as much attention as one did the first time going along. And so it's one of the interesting things is that, kind of was reflecting on different kind of things that might have happened to me. There's this kind of teaching that the Buddha gives, which is this kind of teaching of a newly arrived bride. There's a sutta called The Bad Person, the Bride. And basically he says at the end of the sutta that when in ancient India, when a kind of bride first went to her new family's home, she would establish this kind of keen sense of fear of wrongdoing and kind of like, for lack of a better word, kind of like heedfulness, kind of like being very careful about what she did towards, her new stepfather, stepmother, towards her husband, towards even the servants and workers in the house. But then he says after a certain amount of time, after living with those people for a long time, then she gets kind of, very kind of familiar with them, and, even to her husband, even to other people says, go away, what do you know? And so the Buddha says, in the same way, the bhikkhus, after they've kind of come to a monastery, when they first come, they're very careful, even of the monastery workers, even careful of their preceptor, careful of everything. But after living for a certain amount of time with them and becoming familiar with them, they even say to their preceptor, go away, what do you know? And so there's this kind of interesting thing. Sometimes when one observes one's kind of past, when one observes one's kind of actions, the times when one tends to make very serious mistakes, the times when one tends to get into a lot of trouble, are actually times when this type of familiarity sets in. Kind of things become very familiar, the terrain becomes very familiar, and one stops being as careful. So actually, the same potential for snakes is here in this forest as it was the first time. But just walking along the same road, one doesn't tend to think about kind of the snakes. But the potential is there. So if one isn't careful, one might step on a snake. And so in a similar way with one's kind of meditation practice, when one first comes to meditation, one tends to have this kind of very careful attitude. Oftentimes, sometimes if it's in the West, there might be a particular problem that's come up in one's mind. There might be a particular thing like this, and one is looking for meditation as a way to find some peace. So one is very heedful going with the breath, very heedful to watch it all the way in, very heedful as it turns, can be very heedful as it turns, can be very heedful watching it as it goes out, very heedful all the way along, kind of looking for a place of safety, looking for a kind of a good place to stay. And sometimes as one goes along in this way, being very careful, trying to use meditation to counteract one's problems, one will start to get these kind of these successes in meditation. One might start to have these feelings of rapture. One might start to have these feelings of pleasure that kind of arise in one's meditation. And that can be very pleasant, kind of a more pleasant feeling than one might have felt before, kind of the most pleasant feeling that one's felt before. And so when this kind of thing happens, then one can feel kind of very happy about that. The interesting thing about this is that whenever these kind of successes, one of the things that one can notice is this kind of pattern. Whenever these kind of successes happen in a person's meditation practice, immediately when this kind of good feeling might come to a person, that's when the temptation comes to drop the breath and just run out into the good feeling and forget about the breath, forget about the breathing process, or forget about whatever the topic of meditation was. In other words, one can kind of lose one's heedfulness. And the interesting thing is that when one does this, when one runs towards whatever pleasant feeling there is in the meditation, that's actually when the pleasant feeling starts to fall away. That's actually when it starts to kind of go. It's like, a person, if I remember when I was young, used to kind of ride a lot of bikes. And, if you kind of ride your bike, you're pedaling it really, really hard, pedaling it really, really hard, and then eventually you pedal it so much the pedals don't even kind of have any traction. They just go like this. And then at that point you stop pedaling and you can kind of coast along your bike for a while. But if at a certain point one doesn't start to pedal again, then eventually the bike slows down and you can't balance it anymore and it falls down. So it's a similar kind of principle with one's mind. One wants to keep this attitude of heedfulness all the time in whatever one does. It doesn't necessarily mean that the next moment will be fresh, as in like, same path, I've walked down this path a whole bunch of times before. But what it does mean is that maintaining this attitude of heedfulness is like keeping on pedaling the bike so that the momentum keeps going, so that the bike keeps moving forward, so that one can keep going towards one's destination. Because these things have causes. They have causes, and those causes are what brings about the effects. So remember one time I was at a monastery in Thailand and met a kind of young man, and he was there to ordain. He was thinking about ordaining. And we got to talking, and he eventually told me about this kind of meditation experience that he had when he was in college, where he was kind of doing some meditation, and eventually he had this kind of very overwhelming feeling of happiness, very overwhelming feeling of pleasure. And he said, if I could just get that back, then I'd be happy, whatever I did. If I could just have that would be something that would make me happy. But of course, when you get it, kind of one goes to kind of indulge in it, it falls away. And so this is one of the lessons that one can kind of learn from one's meditation practice, this kind of lesson of keeping up heedfulness, this lesson of keeping up a sense of awareness. So this is the kind of thing that one tends to notice when one comes to meditation practice. This kind of aspect of mindfulness is really important all the time. When one kind of has a meditation topic, one always wants to keep it in mind, whether conditions are good, whether conditions are bad, whatever the conditions are, one maintains one's focus all the time. What this actually does as well, in addition to bringing about kind of any types of pleasant feelings, is it trains the mind to be the same on kind of an even keel, no matter what the outside conditions are. If the outside conditions are good, one stays with the meditation topic. If the outside conditions are bad, one stays with the meditation topic. If one has had a really bad day, somebody's kind of yelled at one, that's going through one's mind, one stays with the meditation topic. If one has had a really good day, a lot of good things have happened, the mind doesn't rush out to just stay with those and think about how good things will be. One just stays with the meditation topic. Because in reality, the way that things works are this kind of aspect of the mind rushing out to jump after something good or run away from something bad, they're both the kind of same thing. The suffering that one tends to feel gets greatly amplified when one kind of writhes or twists about around something one can't change. And the happiness that one tends to feel when something good happens, you can feel amplified when one goes out to rush into it, jumps into it, forgets about everything else, just starts thinking about it. But then when that changes, this is what amplifies the suffering. So in other words, both these things are linked together. This kind of aspect of being really happy when something good happens, this aspect of kind of being really unhappy when something bad happens, these both are linked together. Kind of both have this, as you might say, that one of their causes, the mind kind of rushing out to jump into them, the mind kind of rushing out to indulge in them, to kind of to enjoy them. So I remember when I was, in elementary school, used to kind of, you really kind of want to do well on some tests. You're kind of really studying hard, trying to get good marks, trying to, bring home a nice report card, I guess, maybe for for your parents to see. And eventually, if one kind of does well on a couple tests, one feels very good about that. And so I still remember when I went to high school, there was one girl, and when you go to high school, there's usually you meet up with all kinds of different people from all these different schools. All these schools feed into one big high school. And there was one girl, and there was this history test, and she got, I think, the second best mark in the class on that history test. And there was another person who got the best mark. And she was kind of, pretty upset about that. It's kind of, I was the best in my school, and now I'm number two. So it's to whatever extent that a person's mind tends to rush out to these feelings of happiness, that the feelings of unhappiness affect them when it changes. Another person in that class, say, if they got second best in the class, they might be very happy, kind of not used to getting those good marks. But this person was used to being at the top level, used to being very high. And so it's a similar thing with all the various elements in a person's life. When their children do well, when they do well at work, when their financial situation seems really good, whatever it might be, there's a tendency to rush out into these things, and one can lose the attitude of carefulness that allowed those things to arise in the first place. But in rushing out to these things, that's when one puts one's weight on these external things and suffers when they change. So when we train our minds in meditation, what we're really learning to do is to train our minds to, one of the things we're learning to do is to train our minds to be the same, regardless of the external circumstances. We're learning to train our minds away from things that are external to us, away even when very pleasant feelings arise in the mind, we just stay with this meditation topic that we're cultivating. Even when really great things happen in our day, we want to think about them and kind of want to replay them, think about how wonderful the future will be. We stay with our meditation topic. Even when really bad things happen in one's day, kind of, terrible things, somebody said something really bad to one, kind of, I don't know, maybe somebody's kids come back with an F on their test or something like this, then regardless, one learns to stay with the meditation topic, not rushing out during one's meditation to think about how to solve this problem necessarily, to think about how to fix it. One just stays with the meditation topic. In doing this, one develops a kind of refuge, because when one comes to meditation, this is what people are usually very heedful for. They're looking for something that will provide them a place of safety, something that they haven't been able to find in whatever it is the conditions are that cause them to suffer. They're looking for a type of happiness that will be more stable, that will be more reliable, something they can train their minds in and something they can rely upon. So we learn to do this when we keep this attitude of heedfulness around us all the time, always learning to stay with something safe. In meditation, we train our minds to always stay with the meditation object. We train our minds to always stay with the breath. We train our minds to always stay with metta. Whatever it is, the object that we're cultivating in meditation, we train our minds to stay with this. Even when pleasant feelings come up, very amazing feelings, they could be of rapture or whatever it is, we train our minds to stay with this meditation topic. And in doing this, we keep pedaling the bicycle. We keep the momentum going. We keep things going forward. And we don't go and rush into it and stop pedaling and coast along until the bicycle shudders and stops. So this is one of the paradoxes of keeping pleasant feelings going, is that they always require a measure of effort. And when one starts to notice this, one starts to see that there's stress in anything that one has to put together. Anything that one has to keep going always requires this element of production to it. There's not this kind of thing where one gets a happy feeling and then can just indulge in it forever. When one tends to indulge in these things, then they fall away. When one kind of saves up a whole bunch of money and goes on a whole bunch of vacations, the vacations are fun, but one isn't earning money when one's on vacation usually. If one goes on vacation after working for several years, and maybe one can go on vacation for a few years, but then one wouldn't have any money anymore. And so this is the way it is with things that are conditioned. Anything that's conditioned is something that's put together and something that requires this element of production to keep it going. And in keeping it going, there's this element of stress. So this is when, in one's meditation practice, one can learn to turn one's mind more towards wisdom. This aspect of wisdom that whatever it is that's subject to arising is subject to ceasing. Whatever it is that that one pursues, that one hangs on to, that's subject to change. When one directs one's mind in this way, what one's actually doing is cultivating this aspect of dispassion, cultivating this aspect of pulling the mind back even further from the things that it grabs onto that cause it to suffer when it changes. And kind of one thing is staying with the meditation object, another thing is to try to find why the mind's going out in the first place and how to permanently put an end to it. Because this is the true potential of the Buddhist teachings. It's kind of not just the pleasant feelings that arise from meditation, not just, becoming more clear-headed, so one might, be a little less stressed or whatever it is. The true potential of the Buddhist teachings are to find a permanent end to all suffering and stress. And this comes when one learns to see these kind of things. One can learn to see that whatever is put together is subject to falling apart. And this is something one can know directly for oneself through one's meditation practice, through cultivating the topics that the Buddha talked about, and through observing very closely the way that it is the mind works. This is when the Buddhist teachings become less of a teaching in the books, less of a teaching that the teachers will teach us, and something that we know for ourselves, something that we've taught ourselves, something that we've observed ourselves, and something that we know ourselves. And this is when they become our true possession. Because if a person can cut their fetters, if they can cut their attachments to the things that cause their mind to go way up when it's good, way down when it's bad, to the things that cause them to rush out and be happy for a while and then become despondent, if they can cut their attachment to these things, then they find a peace that's beyond them. They find a peace that doesn't depend on them. And this is a peace that's much more stable. This is a peace that moves forward step by step and ends in a peace that doesn't change at all. But the main factor, I guess what the Buddha says is kind of the highest quality that one can have on this path is this heedfulness, is this sense of always kind of treading very carefully, always kind of watching very carefully, always keeping one's awareness on one's task, keeping one's awareness on one's goal. No matter how many times one's traveled down the road to Endagala, maybe still trying to be aware of snakes. No matter how many times one has sat down to meditate and watch the breath, still trying to stay with it very closely all the time, all the way in, all the time, all the way out. Almost as if this was one's first time doing it ever, keeping this attitude of heedfulness. Because when one is heedful like this, one can see the patterns in the mind. One can see how it rushes out, one can see how it comes back, and one can see what it is that causes one to suffer. And it's in seeing these things, in seeing their causes, in seeing their effects, that one can learn for oneself how to put an end to them. That one can learn to become independent in the Buddha's teachings, that one can search for oneself and find for oneself an end of suffering. Okay? So leave that for reflection, and hope that everybody in Toronto has a great day, and wishing you all the best till next time.